My name is Michael Smith. I'm a professor of animal science at the University of Tennessee. There I have a research and teaching appointment. Have been at the university since 1988. I'm with poultry science for the last 36 years. I tell people I'm from the South, the deep South. South of Miami, south of Cuba, on the south side of Jamaica in a parish called St. Elizabeth. I grew up in a very rural environment, relatively poor, as a matter of fact, quite poor. My dad was a subsistence farmer, had a few chickens and goats, a few heads of cattle, raised a few crops. I have two brothers and a sister when we grew up, and that was our existence. You know, as strange as it may sound, my favorite childhood memory is reading library books. As I mentioned before, I grew up really poor. We didn't have very many books around the house, but also my brothers and sisters were separated from me by quite a few years. And as a result, I didn't have very many children with whom to play. And so I resorted to reading books. However, the books around the house were literally non-existent, precious few. Those that were there had leaves missing or pages missing, things like that. And so I actually resorted to reading library books, and I think that's where my love of learning actually started. Well, I attended the Jamaica School of Agriculture, and after that first year, I obtained a summer job at the Appleton Estates, which is the largest cane sugar manufacturing estate in the country. It's also the largest rum distillery. My job was relatively mundane. It had nothing to do with distilling rum. I was actually in the timekeeping office where I worked with the bookkeeper to check the workers' time cards for the amount of work that they did. When I graduated from St. Elizabeth Technical High School, I went on to the Jamaica School of Agriculture, which is really where my undergraduate work started. This was a 3-year program where I obtained a diploma in agriculture. Having been in the workforce for about 7 years, I obtained a scholarship from the Ministry of Education in Jamaica to attend Oklahoma State University. After 2 years, I obtained a bachelor's degree in agriculture with a major in animal science. I then returned to Jamaica to work for about 3 years. And after that, I returned to Oklahoma State University for my graduate program. Actually, Oklahoma State University was chosen for me. As I mentioned earlier, I had been working with the government of Jamaica, and an opportunity came up for a scholarship because the government wanted some trained individuals to staff a new agricultural high school that was going to be built. They selected me then to obtain an animal science degree, and the folks at the Ministry of Education actually surveyed different programs in the United States and decided that Oklahoma State University was the sort of program that they wanted their staff member to obtain their degree from. And so that's how I ended up at Oklahoma State University. For the graduate program, Oklahoma State was a known quantity. Having been there, they had expressed an interest in my returning to graduate school. And furthermore, they offered me a graduate assistantship, which was very, very important considering that I had a wife and 3 children. Actually, if the truth be known, I was quite interested in swine production. So when I was going back to graduate school, I really wanted to do swine production, but the folks at Oklahoma State Animal Science Department informed me that they did not have an assistantship available in the swine area. However, they did have, there was a brand new professor, young professor, who was interested in poultry research, poultry nutrition research. And as a result of that, his name was Bob Teeter, of course, and he was really interested in heat stress research in poultry. Well, if anyone knows Jamaica and have been to Jamaica during the summer, they know that it is very, very hot. So this made a lot of sense to me then, that I could study poultry nutrition and management research in heat stress animals, and this would help the farmers in Jamaica or other parts of the world that had this kind of a climate. And so I got very interested in that and decided to go ahead with that particular program. The Jamaica School of Agriculture does have a diploma program, a 3-year program, and this essentially trains one to work in the extension service with the Ministry of Agriculture or teach agriculture in high school, and I actually did both of those. Once I graduated from the Jamaica School of Agriculture, I worked in 2 different high schools teaching agricultural science. I also worked with the Ministry of Agriculture as an agricultural extension officer. Basically, what I was doing there was helping farmers like my dad, subsistence farmers like my dad, improve their standard of living by helping them to learn about improved agricultural practices. My fondest memory is while I was working as an agricultural science teacher, I was asked to be a resource person at a 4-H adult leaders camp. And while I was there, I met one of these 4-H adult leaders who just happened to be a student teacher, and she eventually became my wife. The University of Tennessee, when I finished my stint as postdoc at Oklahoma State University, I was fortunate enough to have been offered positions at 2 different land-grant institutions. When I visited the University of Tennessee, I found that the faculty members who were there at the time were very collegial, very interested in having me there. The administration agreed to upgrade some facilities to the point where I could conduct heat stress research, which was very important to my career. And so that was the reason I chose the University of Tennessee. The University of Tennessee, I'd say the fondest memories here was actually the fact that I have worked with students in many capacities. In many instances, I see prospective students during the summer when they come for orientation prior to their first attending University of Tennessee. In many instances, I am able to advise them on course selection and etc. I will then, once they become students, I become that first instructor that they encounter, and in many instances I become their academic advisor. Later on, I also teach the poultry production course, which is a senior level course, and so I help these students find careers in the poultry industry. So basically, having that great of an impact on a young person's life has been really a blessing, and that is my fondest memory from the University of Tennessee. Actually, as a young researcher, my work involving electrolytes, particularly potassium, as it relates to heat stress poultry, has garnered quite a bit of attention over the years, and it has been very important in making sure that this sort of a bird population is able to survive well. I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud of the fact that I have been able to work with several graduate students and help them develop into young professionals who are now all over the United States as well as different parts of the world. I'd say the single most important individual in my career path was an agricultural extension officer. His name was Willie Benjamin, and this was in Jamaica. And I used to watch him come around, visit people like my dad. I mentioned before, my dad was a subsistence farmer, but he helped him develop different techniques which would improve his production practices. And I thought that was so cool. And right there and then, I decided that I would go into agriculture, and as a matter of fact, practically in extension, which I eventually did. But it was with that gentleman that I actually got started. Of course, once I got to Oklahoma State University, in my undergraduate interpretation of research course, the professor in that course was a gentleman called Joe Whiteman. And Dr. Whiteman was so involved in the idea of doing good research that I became enthralled with that aspect of my career, decided to go to graduate school once the opportunity came about. Later on, once I was in graduate school, of course, Bob Teeter mentioned earlier as a young, enthusiastic researcher, and I was his very first graduate student. And as a result of that, he and I worked very closely together in the heat stress area, and that literally started me on my career. My membership in PSA has been a blessing. I attended my first meeting in UC Davis in 1982. That's 36 years ago. I have attended just about, well, most meetings. I think I've probably missed 5 in the late 80s and early 90s. But during that time, I have met so many academically gifted and wonderful persons who have become friends for life. My colleagues have been wonderful. I have been able to serve the association as session chair at various annual meetings. I've worked as reviewer for our journals. And early on, many years ago, I was elected as a director, a member of the board of directors. Several years later, I was tapped to be the second vice president of our organization, which eventually led me to become president. And so serving the organization like this has really been something very important to me, because this organization is the premier organization for poultry science in the world. And so being able to work with friends and colleagues and work alongside some very hardworking individuals who really have the science of poultry at heart has been really, really good. Really, when I think of all the members of this association who have been named fellows in the past, and for me, a poor lad from rural Jamaica, to join this group has been a real blessing. It is a humbling experience that my name will be among all these other individuals, but more importantly, my peers, whether it's the person who nominated me, the committee of fellows who voted for me, the board of directors that endorsed me, for them to have so much faith in the fact that I have been able to make the contributions to this organization, and for them to recognize that is truly humbling.